I'm so glad you could join me. My name is Pixie. I make videos about art and books, and October did not go as planned for me, but I did read some books, and I want to tell you how my gothtober reading went. And I'm thinking I want to do this in rising order of enjoyment. So we'll start with the book I DNF'd, which was the one I read for the disability prompt, to read a book with a disabled character. And the book I had chosen was A Room Called Earth by Madeline Ryan. And it was just not for me because it was too spiritual. And here's the thing, I read books all the time where I disagree with the characters or the author on things. But in this case, I just found it really annoying. Particularly when she said meditation, not medication. I was like, okay, that's enough. So I DNF'd that, and instead for the disability prompt, wait, no, I'm already going out of order. You'll just have to wait and see what I read instead for the disability prompt. So the next on the enjoyment scale is 2 stars, which I gave to The Strain by Guillermo del Toro and Chuck Hogan. The only thing I liked about this was, I think, where Guillermo del Toro was involved, which is how the vampires worked. It was a weird parasite virus thing that made people vampires, and they were super monstrous, not sexy at all. Their dicks fell off when they became vampires. Yeah. It was a lot. And they had mosquito-like long suckers to suck blood with. And they had to unhinge their jaw to release the sucker. It was spooky. But here's the thing, the rest of the book was just so adult fiction stereotypy, and that made it boring, despite how spooky and cool the vampires were. I did finish the whole book, so that's something. But yeah, no. The main character has problems in his marriage. He's newly divorced, and he has a history of alcoholism, and the book is also set at Ground Zero, where the World Trade Center used to be. And there's a Van Helsing type character that's a Holocaust survivor. And I have a bit of a bone to pick with contemporary authors using these real historical and very tragic events in fiction, because I feel that they are overused as a way to appeal to our emotions. And obviously they do, because they're awful things that happened. But I also feel, how do I put this? It feels like a shortcut, essentially. It feels like the author is taking a shortcut to a big emotional impact. And that to me kind of, I don't want to say it feels disrespectful, because obviously you can write about any historical event, and I think you should. It's just done a lot. It's overdone. Then I strayed from my TBR twice. I read Wilder Girls by Rory Power for the LGBT prompt instead of, I don't remember which book I said I was going to read, but not that one. Because I had borrowed it from the library in September, and then I never read it back then, so I wanted to read it before I returned it. And so I read it, and it was really good. I gave it 3 stars. I have no big complaints. It just did a 3-star level impact on me personally. But I will say that if I had read it when I was 17, it would have become my entire personality. The like slightly toxic homoerotic friendship thing she has going on, relatable, well done. And yeah, young adult horror can be a bit of a hit or miss for me, but I really liked Wild Girls. Should I say what it's about? I feel like I don't need to give you a synopsis because that's so easily available. But what I can give that you can't like Google is my opinion and like the vibes I got and what I personally got from the experience. But it's about teenagers at an isolated boarding school on an island, and they get this weird virus, and it affects like the wildlife and the plants on the island as well. And there's like experiments done, and the virus makes them like grow new body parts and become a bit feral. So it's really it's interesting, and I liked it. Next on the enjoyment scale, we have another vampire book, Certain Dark Things by Silvia Moreno Garcia. It's described as a modern noir, and it does have a detective, a police officer, which I don't know how to feel about. I feel like she was framed very much as like a good person working in a bad system. I don't know, to me that apologizes for the system itself, and I don't like that, politically speaking. But also, it was a good book. It was really good. It had vampire gangs and human gangs and gang conflicts and different species of vampires, which I thought was really interesting. And she connects it to like the indigenous population. And there's also a species of vampire, a colonizer species that came over from Europe. And she says that they brought diseases with them, which is really apt because that's a part of the real history of Spain's colonization of Mexico. So I thought that was really neat, and I would have loved to have more about that vampire lore established, and like the sort of intra-vampire conflicts, as well as vampires being unwelcome in human society. Humans are aware of vampires though. So yeah, it was really interesting. The reason it didn't get like a full 4 stars, I would say a 3.5, is partly because there was a romance subplot that I didn't mind it, like, but I just wished for less of that and more about the vampire stuff. Also, like, this is my biggest complaint, and I know it's really petty and silly, but she did that thing where she said, if this was a movie, X would happen, but it's not a movie, it's real life. And I get so annoyed when authors point out in their book that it's real life. Like, I get that it's the internal monologue of the character, and I can see myself having that kind of internal monologue when I was like in my late teens, early 20s maybe, but it's kind of overdone in books at this point, and whenever I see it, it just like takes me right out of the story because it feels like breaking the fourth wall. And I'm not a big fan of the clever meta commentary. I would like you to just be clever within the confines of the story, please. That's how I feel. Your mileage may vary. Now we're circling back. I've forgotten to say which prompts I read the books for. The Strain, the Bad Vampire book, was for a book I forgot I had. Turns out I forgot it for a good reason. And Wild Girls, LGBT, yeah, I said that. And Certain Dark Things was for BIPOC author. I swapped out the beautiful ones for that one because I wanted to fill the buzzwordathon prompt for September, which was to read a book with light or dark in the title. And I've been doing those all year, so I wanted to catch up and do my September one. Now we get to the disability prompt. The book I did end up reading was actually a non-fiction book, a memoir. It's called But You Don't Look Autistic at All by Bianca Tullips. And as someone who has read a bit about autism already, a lot of the stuff she says in it I already knew, like about autism in high functioning, low support needs women. What it actually means when people say that is, I think, verbal and like average intelligence autistics. I think that's what people mean when they say like high functioning or low support needs. But anyway, what I particularly liked was how she goes through the criteria in the DSM and explains with like examples from her life, like this is what this symptom means in practice, because obviously the diagnostic criteria is written in a very like sterile, medicalized language, and it's not super easy to understand for a layperson. So I thought that was really good. So I really like that, and I would definitely recommend it, particularly if you don't know anything about autism. It can be a good starting point. And then I finally read Woman Eating by Claire Coda for the prompt, a book with a Victorian aesthetic portrait on the cover, which again, like I said in my TBR video, I know this one doesn't have that, but the other cover for this book has it. So, and I really liked this. I gave it 4 stars. It's only like 240 pages, but it covers a lot. I'm gonna read what I wrote in my reading journal, because I think I said it pretty well. I love this take on vampirism as being torn or stuck between cultures, loneliness, hunger, desire, self-hate and acceptance, art, death. She covers a lot in just over 200 pages. And I think it works. Obviously, none of these topics are like explored in super deep depth, because it's so short. But because it's all tied together with the sense of alienation, I think it works really well. It's also about her mother, her relationship with her mother, and her relationship with like being exiled from her culture, like human culture, but also like Japanese culture. Her dad was human and Japanese, and she's living in England. If you notice that I tabbed this, I started tabbing it because I started noticing autistic traits. I don't think this was like intentional. I think it's how she describes what it's like to be a vampire. But the way she described her vampire traits just gave me big autism vibes. And it's 11 different traits or symptoms. Like when the same thing came up again, I didn't put a new tab. So, like sensitivity to sound and light, for example, I only put 1 tab, even though it comes up multiple times. So I thought that was neat. And I found that relatable. And it just made me, I talked about this on TikTok already, but I find it interesting how we latch on to monstrous characters like vampires and want to make them human because we feel like monsters when we're like shunned by society for some reason or other. Basically, any way you're marginalized can make you feel like an outsider sometimes. And some of us handle that by latching on to monster characters because we identify with their outsiderness. And yeah, so I just really like explorations like this for that reason, where it's not just like I relate to the villain and the villain doesn't get to say their part or is never explored or is never complex and it's just evil, you know? Anyway, I really, this was the favorite of the vampire books I read. There were 3 if you had lost count. I actually finished this today. It's November 3rd, but I'm gonna count it anyway. So this was a favorite author backlist, which is kind of a cheat because this came out in 2021. But Helena Oyemi did it again. The absolute madwoman. I love this a lot. By the way, this could also have worked for the LGBT prompt or BIPOC author, obviously. So this entire book is set on a train, and that in itself I find interesting because trains are such a transitional space. Like, you're not in one place and you're not in another, you're just in between places. It's a bit of a limbo. And without spoiling the big reveal, I'm gonna say it's definitely intentional. The choice of setting is very purposeful. She doesn't do anything by accident, this woman. Also, everyone's gay in this book, almost. Like, the main couple are 2 men, and the woman who like owns the train is in a relationship with another woman who is also on this train. And that was just delightful. I cannot explain how magic works in this or anything because I do not know. But there is some kind of magic. Something weird is going on. I'd say that this is speculative fiction, or I guess fabulism, I think is another term people use. It's not enough to be fantasy, but it's unreal. 5 stars. Strongly recommend. Please read. And last but not least, Kraken by China Mieville. Mieville is another one of my absolute favorite authors along with Oyemi. And this book reminded me why. He is also a genius. So the prompts I read this for were flora, fauna, or fungi on the cover. Also plot twist, because oh boy, the twists and the turns. They really turned and twisted, let me tell you. I could have chosen this for backlist as well, because it's from 2010. Lolcats are mentioned in here, which is very fun. Anyway, it's an urban fantasy that reads kind of like detective mystery novel. There are even cop characters in it. And what I enjoy so much about China Mieville is that he made these cop characters like real characters, and I even liked one of them a bit. But he's also very clear that like these are class traitors at the end of the day, no matter how cool and badass this female cop was, because obviously it was the cool badass woman that I enjoyed. I am very predictable. It's so imaginative, and in a way it reminded me of Perdido Street Station by Mieville, because it also gave me that feeling that this is a huge and rich and interesting world, because sometimes ideas come up and they're super interesting and I'm like, this is a whole novel concept in itself, but it's just a detail in this novel. And yeah, it just makes it such an enjoyable reading experience. Like, I cannot stress enough how fun it is to read Mieville, like what a ride it is. You're going places when you read his books. And I love that for you. Let me read you a sentence to give you like something of an idea. Imagine if the one apocalypse you missed was the real one. Are you imagining? I forgot to say, the inciting incident to the mystery is that a giant squid gets stolen from the Natural History Museum. And it's like, you know, it's a big giant squid in its jar of like formaldehyde and whatnot. And the scientist who oversaw it teams up with a squid cultist. There's a lot of like religious sects in this that are sort of at odds with each other. And the meeting of like science and religion is super interesting, and I really like that. There's also a subplot where magical familiars go on strike against their like magician employers, and spirit character who's like a union organizer for them. It's super cool. And yeah, it has a lot. I did have some complaints, which is unusual when I read Mieville. One of them is that there's like a detail thing that happens at the end that I feel is too typical for Mieville to do it, because I expect him to do the unexpected. But I guess since I didn't expect him to do that expected thing, that makes it unexpected. I don't know. There's also like a philosophical contentment. Is that even the right word? Point of contention is the correct word. But like, it's still 5 stars and I still love the experience of reading it. So I think it's all good. And I really think you should read it. I mean, look how floppy it is. Don't you love a floppy paperback? Okay, that's it. I think I mentioned it in that video that I was considering a drawing challenge for October. And I have been doing that. I'm not done yet, and we are in November now. But I have been doing that and been posting it on TikTok and Instagram. So you can go check it out if you want. I need to drink my tea now before it gets cold. I've just been babbling on. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with me, and let me know how your reading went in October. Did you read any vampire books, and were they good? Oh, no! Oh, I almost forgot. I should probably say, for Gothic Mood Read, which is the last prompt, I did start Paradise Lost by John Milton. And I'm halfway through it now. So, I mean, you could say that I failed the readathon, but I am gonna say that I am winning because I'm halfway through this pretty dense classic. And it is enjoyable, but it is also like a homework assignment. I just am a sick, twisted person and enjoy that kind of thing. So don't feel pressured to read books you don't want to read. I feel like this should probably get its own video because there's a lot in it. Like, it's had such a big impact later on and inspired a lot of things that you can sort of see, and also takes inspiration from a lot of things that luckily is explained in the footnotes. One fun thing is that the footnotes at one point pointed out that this word choice is probably meant to be a dick joke, but they don't phrase it like that. I think the footnote said it's a priapic pun. But I know what priapic means. You can't fool me with fancy words. I know that means penis. It's a really interesting work. Even as a staunch atheist, it's like part of my cultural history. And yeah, like I said in the TBR, has had a big impact on Gothic fiction. So it's cool to read. So I'll keep you posted. You should probably follow me on TikTok, in case I don't make a YouTube video, but I do a TikTok one, because those are easier to edit. Thank you again for hanging out, and check out my links down below if you want. My shop is closed at the moment because I'm not doing well, but otherwise the stuff is there. Take care of yourself, and I will see you next time. Bye!